In this presentation, you will learn about the Dalit Feminist Standpoint from the point of view of Sharmila Rege. The most important highlight of the last 2 decades of the 20th century was increasing visibility of third world feminist struggles. In the Indian context, there was an assertion of caste identity and consciousness and the importance of the role of caste to strengthen social movements and transformative politics was discussed. In the early 1990s, the emergence of independent, autonomous Dalit women's organizations and discourses prompted discussions around the questions of difference in feminist politics. The works of 3 scholars stand out in this regard: Gopal Guru, Sharmila Rege, and Chaya Dattar. The highlight of the debate is on the questions of a Dalit feminist standpoint and intersectionality in feminism. In this presentation, we focus on the Dalit feminist standpoint put forth by Sharmila Rege. Feminism is about all genders having equal rights and opportunities. It is about respecting diverse women's experiences, identities, knowledge and strengths, and striving to empower women to realize their full rights. The intellectual history of feminist standpoint theory can be traced to the writings of Marx, Engels, and Lucas into the standpoint of the proletariat. From a historical perspective, standpoint theory focuses on what happens when the hitherto marginalized people begin to gain public voice. A Dalit feminist standpoint is viewed as emancipatory since the subject of its knowledge is embodied and visible. This position claims a higher emancipatory status than other positions. It also counters pluralism and relativism, which puts forth all knowledge-based and political claims as valid in their way. The Dalit standpoint theory's emphasis is on individual experiences within socially constructed groups. It focuses on the hierarchical, multiple changing structural power relations of caste, class, and ethnicity which construct such groups. According to Sharmila Rege, the category of Dalit woman is not homogeneous since the subject or agent of Dalit women's standpoint is multiple, heterogeneous, and sometimes contradictory. It means that the subject of Dalit feminist liberatory knowledge must also be the subject of every other liberatory project. This requires a thorough engagement with and an understanding of the processes by which race, gender, caste, and sexuality all construct each other. Thus, the Dalit feminist standpoint itself is open to liberatory interrogations and revisions. There are various streams in feminism: Black feminism, liberal, Marxist, post-structuralist, etc. Dalit feminism is a stream of feminism that came into light with the rise of the third world feminist struggles. The perspective developed in response to the shortcomings of both the mainstream women's movement and the Dalit movement in addressing the concerns of Dalit women. The challenges faced by Dalit women need to be understood in terms of their specific location where caste and gender intersect. Dalit feminism is a theoretical perspective that revolves around Dalit women's experiences and uses it as a vantage point wherein patriarchy and caste are understood as intersecting social structures. Dalit feminism gives a historical account of how the nature and intensity of women's exploitation changes with respect to their social location and challenges the myth that all women are equal and equally exploited. Focal points of Dalit feminist standpoint. Rege observes that feminism that developed in the 1970s is distinct from the left in 3 crucial levels: categories of women, experience, and personal politics, all of which were central to feminist theorization. The category woman was understood as the collective state of women being subjugated by virtue of their womanhood. The categories that were deployed often led to exclusions of women's realities as they existed around race, caste, class, and ethnicity. In the 1970s, the vocal feminists belonged to the privileged sections of society, which were white, middle class, university educated, and heterosexual women. The experiences of these women came to be universalized as women's experience. This was accompanied by sweeping generalizations such as all women are niggers, all women are Dalits. It was argued that women essentially connected with other women. As a result, the subjective experiences of knowledge became the basis of theorizing the universal experience of womanhood. Experience thus became the base for personal politics as well as the only reliable methodological tool for defining oppression. From this standpoint, Dalit women's experiences were completely invisible. There was thus a masculinization of Dalithood and a Savarnization of womanhood, resulting in the exclusion of Dalit womanhood. The decades of the 1970s and early 80s were referred to as the times of reinvention of revolution, in which several organizations emerged. The Shramik Mukti Sanghatana, Satyashodak Communist Party, Shramik Mukti Dal, Yuvak Kranti Dal. They did not believe in token inclusion of Dalit women but had the revolutionary agenda to give central role to Dalit women. However, a similar commitment was not visible with the other two movements of the time, the Dalit Panthers and the Women's Movement, both of which were constituted mainly by the left party-based women's fronts and the newly emergent autonomous women's groups. The Dalit Panthers made significant contribution during the cultural revolt of the 1970s, but in their writings and their programs, Dalit women were reflected only in their roles as the mother and the victimized sexual being. The left party-based women's organizations brought to focus economic and work-related issues and also helped develop a critique of the patriarchal capitalist state. The autonomous women's group also highlighted the problem of violence against women. This triggered debates between class and patriarchy, but these formations did not address the issue of Brahmanism. While for the former, caste was contained in class, for the latter the notion of sisterhood was central and important. All women came to be considered as victims and by extension Dalit, resulting in a classical exclusion. The autonomous women's groups of the early 1980s were dependent on the left framework. During this time, they developed sharp critiques of mainstream conceptualizations of work, development, legal processes, and the state. This paved the way for the emergence of several theoretical and praxeological reformulations. The feminist group agreed upon a materialistic framework to understand the oppression of women. Since these groups were rooted within the class framework, they naturally focused on the commonalities across class rather than caste or community. This is clear in the major campaigns launched by women's movements such as anti-dowry, anti-rape, anti-violence struggles. These campaigns lacked the analytical frame, which is an important feature of the tradition of Mahatma Phule and Dr. Ambedkar that viewed caste hierarchies and patriarchies as essentially interlinked with each other. Caste-based violence against women follows a pattern. It is seen that varied issues like the incidence of dowry deaths, violent control, and regulation of mobility and sexuality of women is a persisting feature of the dominant upper caste. Dalit women, on the other hand, are more likely to face collective and public threat of rape, sexual assault, and physical violence at the workplace and in public. A cursory look at the statements issued by various women's organizations during the Mathura rape case reveals this bias. While the National Federation of Indian Women viewed rape in terms of class, the socialist women used the term glass vessel cracking, referring to the loss of honor, and the All Indian Women's Conference provided psychological explanations. Scholars observed that the sexual assaults on Dalit women in Marathwada during the Namantar movement failed to garner any reaction. According to them, the anti-rape campaign therefore became more of a single issue. Rege argues that the increasing viability of Dalit women have made them vulnerable to violence and attack. Dalit women in power structures such as sarpanchs or members of the panchayat and in the new knowledge-making process has led to an increased backlash against them. Dalit women are at the receiving end of humiliating practices which often result in rape or the killing of their family or clan member. Such incidents emphasize the need for a dialogue between Dalits and feminist activists, since intercaste relations at the local level may be negotiated through a redefinition of gendered spaces. Rege observes that in the times of globalization and Hindutva, gender issues are being appropriated as cultural issues. Under such a scenario, it is necessary for women to reclaim and reconceptualize their issues. According to Rege, feminist politics should pose a challenge to the caste or class conceptualization of Brahmanical Hindutva. Such an approach calls for a critique of Brahmanical hierarchies from a gender perspective. Such critique has the potential to convert the discourse relating to sexual politics from individual narratives to collective contestations of hierarchies. Rege draws upon Dr. Ambedkar's analysis wherein caste ideology, endogamy, is understood as the foundation of the regulation and organization of women's sexuality. Hence, caste determines both sexual division of labor and division of sexual labor. The processes of acculturation and assimilation are a part of Brahmanization. Historically, there has been a Brahmanical refusal to universalize a single patriarchal mode. Thus, there is an existence of multiple patriarchies as also overlapping patriarchal arrangements. Even if women seek to be united on the basis of systematic overlapping patriarchies, they are nevertheless divided on caste lines. If feminists have to challenge these divisions, their struggles should encompass all of the social inequalities that patriarchies are related to, embedded in, and structured by. Emergence of Dalit women's organizations. Several independent and autonomous expressions of women's identity were visible in the 1990s. One example is the formation of the National Federation of Dalit Women and the All India Dalit Women's Forum. At the state level, the Maharashtra Dalit Mahila Sanghatana was established in 1995. 1 year earlier, the women's wing of the Bharatiya Republican Party and the Bahujan Mahila Sangh was set up by the Bahujan Mahila Parishad. In December 1996 at Chandrapur, a Vikas Vanchit Dalit Mahila Parishad was organized. Within this Parishad, it was proposed to commemorate 25th December, the day Dr. Ambedkar set fire to the Manusmriti, as Bharatiya Stree Mukti Divas. Though these organizations are founded on different non-Brahmanical ideological positions, they converge on several issues such as the celebration of the Bharatiya Stree Mukti Divas and on the issue of reservation for OBC women in parliamentary bodies. As of today, there are at least 3 major contradictory and overlapping positions which have emerged from the struggles and politics of Dalit women in Maharashtra. The earliest well-defined position is the Marxist, Mahatma Phule, Dr. Ambedkarite position of the Satyashodak Mahila Sabha. Another position emerging out of the Dalit Bahujan alliance is that of the Bahujan Mahila Mahasangh. This approach critiques the Vedic Brahmanical tradition and seeks to revive the Bahujan tradition of the Adimaya. The Dalit Mahila Sanghatana has criticized the continuation of Manuvadi Sanskriti in the Dalit male, who otherwise takes pride in his lineage, which emerges from a Mahatma Phule Dr. Ambedkarite ideology. The Sanghatana proposes to give prominence to most Dalit of Dalit women in its manifesto. The Kristi Mahila Sangharsh Sanghatana, a Dalit Christian women's organization, have debated on a variety of issues: the loss of traditional occupations of the converts, their transfer to the service sector, the hierarchical treatment among the Christians on the basis of caste and region, and the countering of oppositional forces led by the church and state-level Christian organizations. The non-Brahmanical depictions of feminist politics have generated self-reflexivity among the autonomous women's groups. Their responses can be categorized as a non-dialectical position of those who believe that it is important that Dalit women take up leadership positions but not apply a non-Brahmanical feminist politics to themselves. The left position, which merges caste into class and continues to question the distinct materiality of caste, this is reflected in their dissent to the declaration of 25th December as Bharatiya Stree Mukti Divas. A self-reflexive position of those autonomous women's groups who recognize the need to reformulate and revise feminist politics since the non-Brahmanical depictions are viewed as more emancipatory. It is clear that the issues addressed by the new Dalit women's movement go beyond the naming of Dalit women and call for a revolutionary epistemological shift to a Dalit feminist point of view. Dalit feminism is not to be understood as an exclusionary closed category that does not allow women who are not Dalits to enrich it. Dalit feminism asserts that since Dalit women are most exploited, their experiences are important in understanding oppression. Rege observes that for many of the scholars who are non-Dalit feminists, such as a standpoint is more emancipatory in that it rejects more completely the relations of rule. Thus, adopting a Dalit feminist standpoint position means sometimes losing, sometimes revisioning the voice that feminists had gained in the 1980s. This process has the potential to transform individual feminists into oppositional and collective subjects. Thank you for watching the presentation.